Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. So yes, I'm doing another saw restoration video because I've been watching some on other channels, and in my opinion, people were absolutely destroying beautiful saws because they're using power tools. One thing I've found when we're restoring these old tools, these old hand saws, is that they can actually be pretty delicate in terms of the etch that's on here, the teeth, all that stuff. So if you're trying to restore them back to not only functioning but trying to pull all those original details out, clean them up, that sort of thing, hand tools or finishing them by hand, in my opinion, is the way to go. It takes a little longer, and it's a little bit more elbow grease, but it is so rewarding in the end. We can save a lot of the history on the saw if we want to. If it's so badly, the plate is so badly gone that we need to take it down to bright steel and that etch is gone, so be it. But most of the time you can save the etch on here, which adds a lot of neat detail to the saw itself. So what I've got here, this is a Disston No. 8 two-hand rip saw. So this was made to be held with two hands and saw back and forth. This, based on the medallion age here, this saw dates back to, it was made between 1896 and 1917, so this is an old saw. I mean, it's 100 years old at the newest. So really a neat piece. It's actually in really good shape for its age. A really good friend of mine gave this to me, and so I want to bring this back to as close to new condition as possible while still preserving its antique qualities. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to take off the handle. So I'll just flip it over. One thing I love about these old saws is that a lot of people have had them. They put their names in them and that sort of thing. So that's pretty cool. So I don't ever take that out. I leave that in just as something neat. So all I'm going to do is just put a flat blade in here. Make sure you get one that fits. Oftentimes I've found that these screws are very thin. The slot's very thin. So I've ground this screwdriver down to have a thin blade. You don't want it to be too thin, but you don't want it to be too wide. Too thin, it'll actually tear the screws up because these are brass. Too wide, obviously it won't fit. So really make sure you get one that fits. So we're just going to take these off. Super easy. Set them aside. What's really nice is all the hardware's here. Just put it in there. Hopefully these come out really easy. Just going to use a wooden thing here. That's not going to fit. Oh, medallion popped out. Other screws are coming out. We'll just grab a punch. Some people hammer these out. I like to push them out by hand, just firm pressure. So the handle is free of its hardware. So now I'm just going to very carefully just kind of wiggle it free. Alright, so handle, we're just going to set that aside along with all the hardware. Now we're going to turn our attention to this plate. Now I want to reduce as much sanding as possible, so I'm actually going to take a razor blade and I'm going to scrape this. So I'm going to start at the back of the saw plate, and I'm just going to very lightly just scrape down the plate itself, and you can see that I'm actually getting quite a bit of rust up that would make sanding this take much longer. So if I can reduce my sanding time as much as possible, I'm going to do that. So I'm just going to do that to both. I'm not in a hurry. The more I can get off doing this, the less work I'll have to do later. And I've only ever gotten one saw that I've not had to do this with. It was a newer one, but these older saws always have to scrape, and that's okay. So it's just scraping until you get as much. What it does too is it takes a lot of the dirt off, a lot of oil, you know, whatever coatings are on there that would really clog up sandpaper. And this is where a lot of people are going to turn to power tools, and this is where they're going to just, in my opinion, like I said, just destroy the really neat quirks of these old hand tools. You can see, especially up in here, I mean obviously that's new, you can see how much of that stuff I've already taken off just by scraping, and I was only scraping for a couple minutes. So I'm going to continue to do this, and then I'll flip it over and I'll show you the other side. Alright, so we have the back side sanded, filed. So what we're doing here is we're going to really scrape this as much as we can to get a lot of this debris off, because we want to try to save this edge, which it looks like we're going to be able to very, very easily. Fortunately, this is coated in something okay, so here's what I want to show you, and what a lot of people destroy. So a lot of people destroy this. You guys see that? See that right there? That's the etch. So it tells us this is a D8. This is the older style because the 8's inside the D. And then it says, what does that say? It says the beauty, finish, and utility this saw commands excellence, or cannot be excelled. Cannot be excelled. Okay. The beauty, finish, and utility this saw cannot be excelled. So, and then Henry Disston, who is the originator of these. Anyways, these etches, this is what I always try to save as much as possible. And by using a power tool, you're going to just remove that because it's not very deep. So now what I'm going to do is finish scraping all this stuff off, and then I'm going to show you how I wet sand this, what I use to wet sand it, and how we go about preserving that beautiful etch. Okay, so now when we want to start sanding this, we're going to use something like this, low odor mineral spirits. I found that this is actually better than WD-40 and water as a wet sanding, I don't know what you call it, medium. And I just brush it on nice and liberally. I have used the standard mineral spirits, the stuff that has quite the smell to it, and don't use it, if you're going to do that, do it outside. Don't use it in a garage with the door closed. It kind of doesn't do good things for you. So anyways, so So what I'm going to do, doesn't matter which side I start on, but I'm going to go with the length of my saw plate. And I'm going to be really careful when I go over my etch. I'm not looking to take a lot of material away. I'm not looking to take a lot of material away, period. I'm not going to polish this down perfect. It doesn't need it. It's not pitted super deep. And a little bit of that patina or stain in the metal, whatever you want to call it, is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm going to tread real carefully around my etch. Take your time with this. I found that when I got in a hurry is when I've screwed etches up, and I've screwed etches up before, and that's really unfortunate. And I hate myself for that, but that's how you learn. So, nice and careful. Again, go over that nice and light. Okay, now, it's always a good idea to periodically stop and check your work. Paper towel, wipe this off. Oh yeah, that is pretty. And now, I already know right away that I'm going to go over this a little more. But one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go over it more close to that edge. Make sure when you're done, if you're using rags like this, let them dry in an area, or be careful, because this stuff is flammable and it will spontaneously combust if you leave it watered up. So, hopefully you guys can see that. There it is. It's hard to see with it this shiny in the camera, but once it's dry, you can actually see it pretty well. Once it's dry, it'll really pop. That etch is all there. I mean, down to the small detail inside the D. I know you guys probably can't see it on camera, but that is fantastic. This saw is really a nice. This was a really generous gift. I was shocked when he gave this to me. I have a bunch of rip saws already, but I love these old saws. They're neat. They're just disappearing. One thing I hate is when people take and paint them, or they cut them into stupid tree art. What is it with trees and saws? It's stupid. A waste of a beautiful saw. And some of those saws that they destroy could sell for 3 or 4 times what they're selling their crappy artwork for. So, anyways, just go through this, a little more mineral spirits. And basically, I'm just going to do the same thing to the other side. The other side, I don't have to worry about an etch. There's nothing there, so I can sand that down pretty easy. But I'm just going to go through and get some of these heavier rust pockets up. And I'm going to actually just do that with just hand sanding with a piece of sandpaper, same grit, 400. I wouldn't go any. If you can see the etch before you start, I would definitely not go any heavier than 320 grit. I'd go like 400 or even 500. And really make sure you scrape before you start sanding, because what you don't want to do is go with the heavier grit sandpaper, like a 60, 80, or 100, or 120, or whatever, all that stuff. Because what you're going to do when you sand it off is you're just going to take that etch right there with it. I also don't soak these in vinegar or do any electroplating or evaporust or anything like that. I know that some of that stuff will take off the etch, so I just hand sand it. I don't mind. These don't take that long to do. I mean, if you wanted to sit and polish this for hours and hours, I mean, go for it, I guess. But I'm only going to go about. Just blend some of these dark spots out. Shift over this. find some of those dark spots. Again, being careful not to hit my etch. And so on and so forth. So I hope you can all see that. But what we have there is that etch, and then we have a saw plate that is polished and ready to go. And that's just hand sanding with 400 grit after scraping. I mean, and then what I'll do once this is done, or once I'm all done, before I put this back together, is I'll hit this with some paste wax, and that'll actually help the saw guide through the wood, help keep the resistance down, and then also kind of help protect this edge. This saw is pretty sharp. I don't know, it could probably stand a sharpening, but I'll do that later. Anyways, so saw plate's done, so onto the handle. So I'm just going to put the saw plate out of the way. Over here on my fancy hangers, maybe, and it's not going to fit. I'll just put it there. Alright, so the handle. Handles are pretty easy. I don't do a lot of sanding to them. Mostly I'll hand sand the face on these. The fronts I'll scrape these edges here. But I actually leave the imperfections. I leave the divots. I leave the name carved in there. If there's cracks, I'll fix them. But otherwise, I mean, I try to keep them pretty much the same. This is definitely coated in something. Not sure if it's with varnish or shellac. So there's the original wood. I don't know. What is this? Who knows what this is? I know some of them were apple, but I think those were later. I don't know. I could be wrong. Whatever it is, it's really pretty. So this is how I get in and do the inside. So I just take a razor blade and I just scrape. I'm not putting hardly any pressure on it, and I'm just scraping around. One thing you probably are not going to want to do is you don't want to breed this. I think it's just shellac, but on this older stuff I honestly don't know. So it could be lead based something. So, you know, make sure you're wearing a respirator or face mask or something. Have a downdraft table, whatever. But all I'm doing is going nice and slow. And I'm not going to scrape this. I'll sand that. It's just areas where I can't get a sander. Places like this. And I've got other razor blades. This is just the one that was closest to me. But anyways, you can see, I mean, that was, what, 30 seconds worth? And it's already taken it down to, I don't know, whatever kind of wood it is. So, anyways, I'm just going to keep scraping that and sand these faces, and shouldn't take too long. Handles don't take too long, at least the way I do it. Again, if you want it sanded down to like brand new, never used, that's your call, but I like the slight imperfections. I personally just think they look neat, so I'm going to leave them in there. If you are doing your own saw, you can do them however you like. So, anyways, yeah, I'm not sure what that is. Some kind of hardwood. So here is the handle. There's the old finish has almost been taken off. There we go. One little trick I use for getting into like round spots or weird spots is take like a carving knife or even a razor blade. It's just a light scrape. Just takes it right off, and then you don't have to do really any sanding. Really handy for getting into these small areas where sandpaper's tough to get. So just go through. So like up in here, I don't know if you can see that. Like that. Just come in. Just a really light little scrape. Here, same thing. Okay, so lots of different finishes. I could stain this if I want to. I could varnish it. I could shellac it. I could paste wax it. I could do a bunch of stuff. I am going to shellac it. Shellacking is an old method of finishing. In fact, a lot of these old saw handles have shellac on them. It's pretty safe. Toxicity wise, I mean, obviously you don't want to eat it, but once it's dry, it's actually food safe. So I'm just going to dip a thing in here, and the thing that I like about the shellac with wood is it leaves a really nice, it enhances the color of the wood without really staining it, so it enhances the natural beauty of it. So on these older saws, they are made with some really, really nice hardwoods. And so I want to try to preserve that. I have stained some before. I've stained some beach handles, just for fun. But ones like this, I really like to leave as much as the original, or as much as the natural wood color as possible. Get in here and get these screws. I'm putting this on pretty heavy, and then I'll come back over and brush it on. And the nice thing about shellac dries really fast, and you can clean it up with denatured alcohol. I use just isopropyl alcohol to clean it up. I just soak my brushes in it. But this is really, and I'll come back and get all those bubbles. I'm just trying to get a really, just trying to put a lot of shellac down, and then I will come back and smooth out the coats. Get all those air bubbles out. I'll probably do this 2 or 3 times, just to make sure that it's nice and even. So you can see that wood grain is going to be really nice. And the more coats of shellac that I put on here, the shinier and glossier it's going to be. So I'm going to put just a couple on there. I don't want it to be too shiny, but I want it to be a nice even coating. So, and you can see too, I've left some imperfections in the wood. This will give it that nostalgic look, but seals up the wood and prevents it from drying out more and splitting. So, okay, so it's already starting to set up. So, cover that. I'm just going to put this handle off to the side and let it dry for a while. Alright, so while that's drying, let's take a look at this hardware. Okay, all the hardware's here. It's all brass. It's not plated. Later stuff was plated. Some saws during World War II were used plated or even just steel nuts. But the old ones didn't. So these are just brass. So how I clean these up, I try not to do too much to them, and I try not to mechanically clean them if I can avoid it all the time, just because it's really easy, especially on these medallions where you've got a lot of detail. You can remove some of that detail. So on something like this, I just take a piece of Scotch-Brite, and it's just back and forth. Sometimes I'll put it on the table. Zoom in here. Let's see what I'm talking about. Maybe. There we go. Okay. So I'm just holding that down, and I'm just rubbing it back and forth. And you can see it's starting to pick up. Now this smaller detail in here, I'll have to get in and do it by hand like this. Just putting my thumb where that is and just a twisting motion. There. That's all I'm going to do to it. I'm not going to do any more. I'm going to leave some of the discoloration or patina in there, because then it just brings the other details out. Now, this is where, if you go to the Disston Institute website, just type it in, Google it, it'll pop right up. You can go in and you can check on the medallions, and it'll tell you the range of when these saws were made. So like this one, this was made between 1896 and 1917. So like I said earlier, this is like pre-World War I, or right up to World War I when we entered the war. But this saw could be made in the 1890s, late 1890s. So this saw is old. I mean, even at its newest age in 1917, the saw is what, 103 years old? It's an old freaking saw. So we're gonna, we're gonna take really good care of it. These ones, we're just gonna give it the respect it deserves and put it back into use. So that's about all you need to do on there. Just clean up these, and then same with this, with these pieces too. Okay, so I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna clean all these up and then get them ready to assemble once I get once my handle's all done. There's all the hardware done, done to what I want. Now, before anybody freaks out, oh, you didn't clean this up all the way. You're right, I didn't. I left some patina on the edges. I did that on purpose. Again, it matches the saw. Alright, so I've just put a second coat of shellac onto this handle. It is in between coats. I let it dry. I let it dry for a few hours, but it says you can let it dry for an hour and then sand it with 220. So I sanded this with 220 and then went over it again, and it definitely came out better. It's definitely a lot smoother. So I'm just gonna let this dry overnight, and then I'm gonna put it all back together. Now, move this out of the way. Saw nuts are done. We have our saw plate. So with the saw plate, we can do a few things. We can either clear coat it, we can leave it, or we can shellac it. But what I like to do is paste wax. Paste wax is excuse me, it's easy to apply, it's easy to touch up. I just use this type of stuff here. I got it down at the hardware store for really cheap. I use it for woodworking. I coat hammers and other tools in it, and I just keep a rag dedicated to it that is all I use the rag for, is the paste wax. And it's just like a paraffin. It's nothing fancy, but all I'm going to do is just rub a generous coat on here. And the nice thing about paste wax, this is actually going to help the saw move through the wood easier. It helps to lessen the resistance. So I just put it on. Put it on both sides. I put it on pretty heavy, and then I'll go back through and okay, so the paste wax is applied and we are good to go on the saw plate. Like I said, it's pretty sharp, so it doesn't need to be sharpened. So now I just got to wait for the handle to dry and put it all together. Alright, we have everything we need to finish assembling. The handle is dry. Looks pretty good. Saw plate has been waxed and cleaned, so it's good. And our hardware is all ready to go. So the thing with this stuff when we put it back together is we don't want to force anything. So I'm just going to slide that handle on. Slide it on, and I'm going to line it up just like that, so I can see daylight through. Then I'm going to take my long studs, I'm going to put them in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in all my screws first. Make sure everything goes in. Sometimes you kind of have to wiggle it around. No big deal there. And then the medallion. You see that? the medallion, I'm going to put it, I always put them in so they're facing straight up and down. You don't have to, certainly, but it's just a thing. Then I'm just going to hold on to them on the back. I'm just going to screw these in, screw the back of these bolts in by just hand tight. So they just go together. Just like that. And again, just putting them in hand tight. Not going to do anything too crazy with them yet. Then I'm just going to come back through with my screwdriver, and I'm just going to tighten them down, snug them. I don't want to over tighten them because brass will strip very easily. And keep going and going. Bam, done. And there we have it. We have a completed saw with a recovered edge. Hopefully you can see that. Do this. See that? There's that edge. It's all there. All done by hand tools. This is a beautiful saw. This is really a pretty saw. I'm quite pleased with this. Shellac is going to be my new go-to for handles because that came out just fantastic. So, anyways, hope you enjoyed this this video. Hopefully it was helpful. If you got any questions or comments, feel free to you know, put it in the comments below the video. I really enjoy these saws. I really enjoy collecting them, and so this is going to get used here pretty soon. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys another time.